we're going to do today is we're going to transition into talking about happiness, or the notion of happiness that entails from an Eastern perspective. Whatever Eastern means. I want to stress I'm talking about Eastern, at least in the context of this class. What I'm referring to is classical Chinese texts. There are certain instances in which things that are Eastern have some similarities. When I say things that are Eastern, well, consider this in terms of commonality. Can anybody think of a major religion in the world that did not begin on the continent of Asia? Name one. I can't think of any. Thus, there's something inherently Asiatic, I suppose, about the religious systems. Okay, you have your more Abrahamic, which are a little bit more intrinsically systematic, and then the further east you go, relative to the Middle East, I suppose, you find things that are less systematic and having a big orthodox system that you have to subscribe to, but nevertheless there are ethical systems for which one needs to be subscribed. And we see that in Chinese thought. So who we're going to talk about today in particular in this notion of happiness, what it means to be happy, how to be happy, is Kongzi. AKA, for whatever reason, his name is Latinized as Confucius. That happens with the Romans like to do that with everybody, okay, and their European successors. So if you're talking about, say, Mengzi, for whatever reason, turns into Mencius, and so on. Some Latinizations make no sense to me. In the Islamic world, we have, say, Ibn Rushd becomes Averroes. I don't know why that's the case. But we're going to take a look at a little bit at what Kongzi says constitutes a good, happy life. As a review, when it came to Epicurus, what was essential for happiness for Epicurus? Not rhetorical.
Pleasure is good and pain is bad.
Yeah, I think that's succinctly what good Lord meant. Okay. Pleasure good, pain bad. So acquire the former, not the latter. And there are some parameters in there. That doesn't mean simply just have nothing but some kind of sensation constantly. It needs to be mitigated by certain parameters. Okay, there are certain kinds of happiness, certain kinds of pleasure that are better than others. Kongzi, not that he's a masochist, but he's not all into pleasure. What is central to Kongzi is structure. Structure of what? The structure of, really, society. I think somewhere in Kongzi might be the origin of the statement, we live in a society. It's an involvement. Okay, in what sense do we live in a society? Well, Kongzi, probably living 6 centuries before the year 0, so about almost 3,000 years ago, he himself in his own time saw himself as nothing more than compiling ancient ways and putting them together. He saw himself as doing nothing novel, just here is the way things are. And the way things ought to be. And so central to Confucius and much Chinese thought is this notion of what happened. And this is where Asiatic thinking and its religious thinking, whether it be Christianity, Islam, Judaism, Confucianism, Taoism, Vedanta, or Hinduism, here's where a lot of religious views, and there's other things I would lump in here too that would be ideological but not necessarily religious. One of the things that religions do that's interesting is they make diagnoses. What do I mean by this? Almost every religious perspective has a diagnosis of the world. What do I mean by this? Well, let's take one that I think more of you will be familiar with, and say the situation in Christianity. What's the deal with the world? Is there a problem? Creation's good, right? So everything's fine. Yeah? No. God even said it was good. When it says that it was very good, literally in Hebrew, it uses the word good twice. That's how you show the superlative in Hebrew. Okay, say it many, many times. Well, so what's wrong? Now, whether you hold the view that there's literally a talking snake that tells some people to eat some fruit, or that's indicative of some greater mythos, but nevertheless represents a true structure, there's a diagnosis there. What explains the problems of humanity? Well, in Christianity, it's the notion of hamartia, or sin. I think that explains why bad things happen. Okay, so there's a diagnosis in a religious perspective. There is a notion of sin in Islam as well, and in Judaism, albeit the flavors there are a little bit different. That you can't just transpose them amongst the different, even Abrahamic faiths, and say they're all identical. There's a diagnosis in Confucianism as well. Okay, Kongzi looks out at the world and says, here's what the problem is. So that's what religions often do. First they start with the diagnosis, now then they offer prescription. Right? So here's the problem, and here's how we fix it. Diagnosis, prescription. Just like when you go to the doctor. Yeah, no bill involved here. Okay. What's the diagnosis? World's bad. Things used to be better. When were they better? In the ancient dynasties of old. And you can get into the minutia of what those ancient dynasties were. Shang Dynasty, Tang Dynasty, and so on. Okay, early Shion Dynasty. And what happened there? I'm going to summarize the basic gist here, because otherwise I could spend a full 10 lectures on that. There's this notion of a golden age in the past. There was once a time when everything was good. Everything fell under the mandate of heaven. Chang Chang. And this is a phrase that comes up in Chinese thought quite a bit. I don't know why we translate it this way. The mandate of heaven. What does it mean? Well, it's similar to something like Deo volente, Deus vult. In Latin, was that God wills it? Okay. Allah Abdullah, all right, God wills it. Okay, it's kind of like that, except there's no notion of God in Confucian thought, Chinese thought. There are notions of deities, for sure. Okay, in fact, the central god is often thought of in the ancient Chinese, like 3,000, 4,000 years ago. You see a lot of notions of dragons. But the main thing that we see in ancient Chinese thought is this notion that there is a cosmic order. That's something that ancient China and ancient India have in common. What's divine is the universe itself, as opposed to some other agent. This is one of the central tenets of Judaism and Christianity. In Islam is that the divine is other. Okay, God created the universe. He wasn't part of the universe unless you're Plotinus. But like I said, in a lot of Eastern Asiatic thinking, and even in India, the universe is itself divine. And so when we talk about the mandate of heaven, this is the way the universe wants it to be. I hesitate to use the word universe, because that's a very recent construction, really comes from Spinoza. But nevertheless, I'll employ it here. The cosmic order wants it to be this way. And things used to be great in the ancient world, and then kings got greedy. And so the almost sounds like something in the Silmarillion. Things were great, and then kings got greedy, and the way things used to be, there was a fall of sorts. Just like you might look at it in Eden in the Abrahamic context. And ever since then, we, humanity, have been trying to put the pieces back together of something that seems impossible to put back together. We're trying to make things right. For Kongzi, the prescription of how to get things right, how do we fix this? How do we fix the messed up world? here's the gateway to happiness. It's really twofold. It's knowing really two things. Okay, I'm reducing it down here. Okay, Confucianism and Kongzi offered no system. People that came after him said, here's what Kongzi would say, and then put it into a nice, neat little package that we can say, here are 10 things that Kongzi said to improve your life. But if I had to, in Kongzi's own words, say, what are the two main points to get at happiness? We got two. One, this, specifically. And two, I'm going to put this. And they're related. Here we go. These words are meaningless right now. So what do they mean? Let's start with this one. Usually, I'm going to translate this the way it's usually translated. I don't like it. The rectification of names. In fact, I think perhaps in English that's more perplexing than Zhang. Or as I saw you squint there too, so I know part of the reason is I write like I'm giving a prescription. But also, it's perplexing. Rectification of names. What does this mean? And also, this notion here, je, means, it's usually translated as humaneness. I don't find that particularly enlightening either. I'll go ahead and put it in a combo with Lee, which is usually translated as ritual. So to go back to our analog of other ways of thinking that we may be more familiar with, okay? Say, and I go to Christianity because I think in the West more people are familiar with it. If the problem in the world is sin, okay, all right, that's the explanatory narrative that tells us why things are bad. Okay, not asking you to subscribe it or endorse it, but that's the explanatory narrative. Explanatory narrative. What's the springboard for? All right, great. Now what? What do we do? Francis Schaeffer said, "How then shall we live?" What do we do? If you're a Christian, what do you do from there? Like, all right, great. Everything's terrible. Thanks, Satan. How do we move on from here? What do you do? Not a trick question.
Follow guidelines to achieve be better.
I think that's a good Jewish and Islamic answer to the question. All right, follow the guidelines. All right, whether it be the Sharia or the Mitzvah, pick one, follow those things. All right. Christianity is a little bit different here. Namely, the answer is usually a person, Jesus, that guy. But there, that's the prescription. Just and here in different versions of Christianity, I'll say different flavors. The apparatus for how that's done is different. But that's usually the answer. Either it involves some sort of transactional forgiveness or doing some, maybe involves doing some stuff, but usually it's not put on our actions, but on a doxastic notion. That is, what do you have to do? Believe really hard. Maybe do some other stuff too, but the belief is the element that's the important thing. That's different in other systems, like Confucianism. So what's the problem? Again, the world is messed up. Why is it messed up? Well, because ancient kings ruined everything for us, and now we're all fractured and fragmented. Now, I've been picking on Christianity because it's familiar, or picking out right now, but we also have ideological systems that do the same kind of thing. That is, they analyze the world, provide a diagnosis, and then provide a prescription. Marxism does this. In what way? What's the problem in the world? There are all hitherto problems in the world are the result of class dialectics. What do? Eliminate those class dialectics. How? Well, there's different answers to that question. If you're Lenin, you create a vanguard of the proletariat. People are too stupid to have class consciousness, so you make class consciousness for them. Okay? That's the early Soviet Union. Stalin's doing something else entirely. If you're Pol Pot or Mao, it's not going to happen through the classes aren't going to rise up. And it's not even the industrial working classes, it's going to be farmers, right? Feudal society, right? Or the post-feudal society, the old serfdom. They're going to be the ones that create class consciousness. Those are Marxist answers to the questions, right? Problem, identifying a problem, creating a diagnosis and a prescription. Here's how we fix it. Psychoanalysis is a big system. You have problems? Probably started in your childhood. Okay? You have mommy and daddy issues. Yes? Okay? Now we need to, there's the prescription. That's what's going on. What do we do from here? Let's dig out what those suppressed notions are and get it out of the way. And all of those, religions or ideologies, we have big programs, big systems that are nothing more than a giant explanatory apparatus that tell you, here's what's going on, here's the answer, and then here's what we do about it to fix it and make things better. This is one too. In fact, human beings are really good at that. We like to have big systems that explain and tell us what to do. And when we don't have those, we get very upset. Just tell me what to do. What's wrong? I want to know, and I want to know what to do. Those are really the two default human modes, in my experience. There's other things we do too, but really we want to know, why is it like this, and what do I do? Well, what does Kongzi say to do? Let's start with this, Zhengming. Kongzi identifies the problem in the world as the disruption of the social order. The reason why there's problems in the world is the disruption of social order, which implies there must be a social order. What's that look like? Well, Kongzi says there are basically 5 relational modes. There are 5 possible relationships that you could be in. And he couches them all in the masculine, probably because he wrote almost 3,000 years ago. Here are the 5 basic relationships, and this is what the Zhengming is. Then I'll explain what the rectification of names means. Here's the 5 basic relationships, in no particular order. And they're all meant to be analogous of one another. And the one he really likes to talk about is this one. That is number 1 is probably the one he talks about the most. So these are the 5 basic relationships. Okay, now for Kongzi, he'll admit that there are others that are not on the list. Later followers of Kongzi, on the other hand, will say those ones don't matter. Here's the 5 that you need to know. The other ones don't count. Okay, that's later confusion. But here's the focus. Now again, they're all put in masculine terms. But you could think of them, I mean, you could change this to mother-daughter or father-daughter or mother-son, that's fine, okay? Kongzi wouldn't do that himself because these are the real relationships. Those other ones are poor imitations of that. Oh, ancient misogyny, okay? All of these relationships are dyadic. You might have other people involved, but here's the dyad. The ones on the left are in a position of authority. And you might be thinking, no, marriage is equal. Sure, today. Maybe that's the case. Not in the ancient world. Everybody in the left column here is in a position of authority. Everyone in the right column is in a position of inferiority. Not that they're to be abused. In fact, Kongzi would say that would be wrong. But that's the basic dynamic. You have people in charge and people that are subordinate. Okay, in any given situation. Okay? Well, in a benign way, who's in charge of the room right now? Here, me. Okay? Not that I'm lording it over you. Okay, and you're free to go. But there's always a sense in which somebody's in charge. And so these are the 5 basic modes. And Kongzi would simply say this. Find where you are on the list. Like, where are you in your life? I don't mean that in some parabolic way. Okay, where are you in your life? Okay? I'm not trying to give off youth pastor energy. But here, where are you? Like, are you a father? No? Are you a son? Probably. You're somebody's kid. Okay, so find where you are on the list. So use this as a diagram to go to. Find where you are on the list. Yep, I'm a child. I'm not married yet. I do have siblings. I am younger than the people in my community, so this already has intrinsically the notion of community wrapped into it. And I do have a ruler. I'm not the king, but I have a king. Or a premier, whatever it is, ruler over you. Someone's in charge. Yeah, I do have a relationship like that. I have a boss. Okay? And do your job. Like, find where you are on the list and do what you're supposed to do. If you're in a position of authority, be benevolent towards those under you. Not be authoritative, but be benevolent. So, Kongzi says one of the problems in the world is that people in the left column end up being abusive or neglectful. There's too many dads in the world going out getting drunk and not coming home. Listen, son, I'm sorry. Daddy's busy. Just one more. Okay? That's a problem. And that creates problems in the family. And their problem starts in the family, echoes and reverberates to all of society. It's not quite psychoanalytic. It's not quite like Freud, but Kongzi is saying that society begins at home. Okay? This is the most important relationship in a way. You might think it's this one. They're actually kind of the same. Starts here. Get this relationship right, all will be right in the world. If we could just get this right, and we don't. Because what do parents do? They get stupid. Okay? Either they get abusive, start smacking kids around, they're neglectful, not now, or they don't do quite enough. On the other hand, children, sons, the virtue they are intended to display is, you'll see this phrase come up often. Confucius' thought, even amongst the others. Filial piety. One of those awkward expressions, thanks to a translator of Chinese from about 100 years ago named James Legge. Filial piety. What does filial mean? Of or pertaining to the relationship of a son. S-O-N, son. Not that yellow ball in the sky. And piety. Holy, righteous behavior. So filial piety, therefore, is the righteous behavior of the son. So in short, really, if you can get this one right, the other ones will follow. This father-son relationship. Are you a parent? Love your kids. Not merely passively, but also actively. Do your job. Are you a child? Do you have parents? Obey them. And not just when they tell you to. There's a sense in which, for Kongzi, it's not merely the performance of duty, it's the attitudinal alignment of duty as well. Did anyone ever have anything like this growing up? I don't want you just to do it, I want you to want to do it. That's what Kongzi's saying here. Not merely the performance of duty. Don't just obey your parents. Well, I guess I got to. I have to clean my room. Don't just do it. Want to do it. So it's not merely the outward performance, it's also the inward alignment of one's disposition. You might think, well, that doesn't sound very happy. That is happiness. That realignment of your dispositions with respect to those relationships. Because really, your unhappiness or your dissatisfaction comes from the misalignment here. Again, it might seem benign. It's much like the alignment of your tires on a car. If you go around not getting your wheels aligned, what's eventually going to happen to your tires? Even though it might seem like, oh, they look like they're fine on the car, you're eventually going to have some wear and tear in places that you wouldn't expect. Why? Because they're misaligned. And over time, that creates damage from the misalignment. Similarly here, even just being a little bit off over time will create all kinds of societal damage and conflict. Preferring one child over another. For example, good job. Wish you could be more like your brother. Okay, that thing. Right there, you created a disruption and a misalignment. What happens when those kids you were just talking to, one of them is going to be the king? Now they're jealous of each other. One brother wants to take over the kingdom. Another Lion King reference, I guess, indirectly. Okay? That kind of jealousy and things like that, greed, comes from this misalignment. If everybody just found where they were on the list and does their job, everything's fine. That's it. Really, that's it. It's really that simple. Okay, and the reason why this is called the rectification of names, that Zheng Ming. Basically, this is rectification, repairing the names. What are names? The roles. You could say that's a Chinese concept for the notion of a role or a performative label. Okay. So these are the names: father, son, husband, wife. The Zheng Ming is a fixing, a repairing, a realignment of our social duties. That's what the Zheng Ming is. And so the first principle is that knowing what your role is and getting it right. Again, I've said I've said this before, actually, on the very first day when some of us were elsewhere. This is actually quite similar to what you see in the Upanishads, okay, in Indian thought, Vedanta, and at least the early Upanishads. Okay, what people call Hinduism. I don't even like saying the word Hinduism because it doesn't make any sense. Okay, there are Hinduisms. There's not really one cohesive Hinduism. But in ancient Vedanta, the Upanishads, okay, it's do your job. Fine. That's what in Indian thought, dharma is your duty. Okay, the thing that you're supposed to do that. Okay. So with the caste system, for example, are you a Brahmin? Are you part of the priestly caste? Guess what then? Be a priest. But I want to be a banker. Stop it. Throw away your dreams and do your job. That's the job there. Okay? In your class, do what you're supposed to do. But I could be the best baker. I'm not really a good priest. Shut up, you're a Brahmin. Be a Brahmin. In India, same thing here. Well, I didn't mean to be a father. That's too bad. You're a dad. Do the job. I don't want to be king. I don't want land. Nevertheless, here you are, my lord. Do the job. And if you just did that, everything would be fine. There would be no disruption. Everybody would be taken care of. No one would be jealous because everybody would be doing what they're supposed to be doing. But that's the simple fix. That's not overly complicated. Everybody find out where you are on the list and just do the job. In conjunction with, now, that sounds great in theory. But there's a little bit more to it than that. Because getting this right, as I've already implied, takes a realignment not merely of our performativity, that is what we do, but also our dispositions and our desires and our proclivities, what we want to do. That's where this comes into play. And with the notion of je, and like I said, for whatever reason in English, when you see an R in Chinese, and it's been translated from Chinese, when you see an R, the sound that you make is actually more like the sh, how would I say it? The zh, that zh sound, but you stick your tongue backwards towards your throat. Okay, so it's not ren, It's more like Jen. It really should be more of a J. But it's also a zhern. So that's Jen, not Ren. So, zhern, humaneness. All this is to be mitigated by this, controlled by this. What does humaneness look like? The specificity of our practice is important. Getting these really, really right. Especially in our rituals. So humane. What do I mean by zheng? Getting things really, really right. There's a sense in which, for Kongzi, outward performance, well, we want the inward alignment and disposition to be down. A way to get that there is to continually practice till we get outward performance to be par excellence, right? To be perfect. So what do? Even simple activities, you get them down to a T. Coincidentally, that also includes things like drinking tea. So, for example, for most Americans, if you say you have a desire to drink some tea, what might you do? There you go. Yep. All right. Maybe you made a picture earlier. You might go through the drive-thru of McDonald's. All right. Will that complete your order? Okay. You might go to the fridge. All right. Pour some tea. All right. It's kind of old. Okay. You might do that. Not in China. What do I mean by that? Why not? Why wouldn't I just go to the fridge? Even the pouring of tea has to be done in a particular kind of way. I'm sure we can have casual moments of occasion. But there's a certain sense, and this is because in the ancient world, tea was something that people did communally, okay, in terms of imbibing it, because most water is trash. And so you need to boil it to purify it. So that makes tea an obvious thing to do. But coming together and drinking hot tea, bringing people, there's a particular way to do it. The way that you hold the pot. The way that the glasses are presented. Even to this day, for some reason, in America, what do we call fancy dishes? I heard somebody say something else. All right, I thought I heard corningware, and I was like, what? Yeah, China. Why? Well, it comes from China. Sometimes it does. Sometimes made of porcelain or something like that. Because the notion is that you might use your paper plates for like an ad hoc occasion. All right, we're having pizza. Probably not getting the China, but for special occasions, we're gonna get all those fancy dishes, right? You can't put those in the dishwasher because they're fancy. For a special occasion. Well, that kind of comes from Confucian thought. The notion that even very simple, innocuous things that we do every day need to be done in a very particular way, like the drinking of tea. There's a Chinese tea ceremony. I think that's incomprehensible to most Americans. Why would you need a ceremony for that? You just go to the fridge. What's the deal? How you even greet someone who is your superior. Now, some of this does make its way into Western thinking, and it really is Asiatic in origin. For example, what do you do when you meet a king or a queen or an emperor or an empress, a duke or a duchess? How do you treat them? How are you supposed to greet them?
Down.
Yeah, or many other things. You can do a little genuflection, okay? Curtsy, bow, my lord. Why the weird greetings? We don't do that with other people. Can you imagine meeting Queen Elizabeth and going, put her there? That's what others do. That's what people do in other. I'm just imagining the President of the United States doing that right now. Because the President does this thing when he shakes hands where he grabs people and pulls them in. Can you imagine doing that to the Queen? Break that woman in half. Okay.
Maybe not.
Why? Why do that?
Because they have authority. Because they have sort of authority.
Yeah, they have that notion of authority, and there's a way that needs to be treated in a particular kind of precious way. That authority needs to be visibly honored. We don't do that to our friends. Maybe in jest. Go see your friends later. Hello. Do something like this. All that comes from this notion that there's a particular kind of way that authority needs to be treated. You should also be treating your parents in the same way. You see that often in the ancient world. If you go back, you can see this in other ancient texts. You see it a little bit in, say, like Gilgamesh, Genesis, Bereshit, where people, the head of the house, even someone's husband, will often be called the Lord of the house. Okay, or something like that. Why? Like say Abraham or Gilgamesh. Why are they lords? Well, because they're the patriarchal figure. Again, this is a patriarchal setup here. They are inherently infused with authority, and that's to be respected. Are you supposed to turn your back on a king or a queen or a royal? No, let me be very clear. I would, right? Because I'm a rebel. But are you supposed to do that? No. That could get you hung. Even in England, say 500 years ago. Don't turn your back on the king. Okay, that's what you see often. You see portrayals of monarchs where they're going all about. People are usually walking backwards when the monarch approaches, so they don't turn their back on them. So that authority needs to be visibly respected and practiced in little ways. Part of the problem that we have, Kongzi would say if he were diagnosing us now, we are far too casual in what we do. Far too casual in what we do. There's some people would agree here. Now, there's a sense in which, I mean, look at me, look at me right now. Would it be conceivable for someone 100 years in the past, okay, in the United States, to imagine someone teaching a university course in agricultural attire? I'm wearing jeans. Why did Levi Strauss invent denim? Holds up on the farm pretty good. What would someone be wearing 100 years ago teaching a university class? Probably a suit, and none of you women would be here. Also, that would be considered part of the appropriateness of the time. I don't think that's right either, but that's part of that. Some of that notion is in here too. This is where this patriarchal appropriateness can get problematic. What's appropriate at what point in time in history? But people will say often with disgust, there's a particular way of doing something. And we are too casual today. So I also have Zoom classes where people show up in pajamas. It doesn't bother me any. The only thing I ask is that people actually have clothes on, which sometimes doesn't happen. I've had to close that camera real quick. It's usually someone else in the background too. Someone has a roommate that just got on the bed and likes to sleep with no clothes on. No, not today. Maybe that's a little too casual. And Kongzi would say precisely, we're too casual in what we do. Even how we go about holding ourselves together, our posture. Are you walking around like this? Expect to be dissatisfied. If you approach the world in a casual way, meandering about, it's not going to go well with you. And treat and then there's a kind of, now some of this later gets infused with another Chinese system of thought called Taoism, okay, which Lao Tzu and Chuang-Tzu are major figures, in my estimation. But there's kind of a preciousness of the moment as well. So this is where you are right here, right now. Okay? Don't treat it as something, be beholden to the moment. Very particular, look at how you approach even very small activities. Is there a particular way to open the door? I don't know. I'm sure Kongzi would have a way to do that. Well, we do it in this way. Okay? And you do this yourself. Anybody live with another human being? Anybody have a dishwasher? Okay, there's the reason why I say that. Does anybody else in your house, if you have a dishwasher, does anybody else in your house put the dishes in the dishwasher correctly?
No.
Why not?
Because there's a certain way to do it, and
And it's your way, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. This is what happens. There's an appropriate way to do it. Obviously, we're careless. The glasses don't go here. You can't stick this thing in here because it doesn't get coverage. There's an appropriate way to do it. But and we're thinking about it there. So what I'm illustrating there is this. We have a sense in which this seems like, in the greater scheme of things, does this really matter? Yes. Okay. I want my clean dishes. In the great scheme of things, no. But it certainly feels like it in the moment. Really, everything should be approached in that way. There's an appropriate way to do this, and I can justify it with reasons. And in Chinese society, that is over everything. And this is important. Even if this is something to know if you're a business major and decide to go into business in China somewhere. Even the way that you sit down to dinner, there's an appropriate way to do it. There's an appropriate way to talk. Appropriate topics. We do this too in the West. There's things you're not supposed to talk about at Thanksgiving. At least in my family. I just don't shop anymore. No, I don't think anybody's going to be showing up in 2 months? Anyway. So the rituals are the thing. We think of rituals usually in the very high and lofty sense of ceremony. Not for Kongzi. Ritual is our everyday activities and thinking about them with an attentiveness of how they ought to be appropriate. Every little thing. How does this look? Is this appropriate behavior? And this also leads into another juxtaposition that Kongzi makes. That I mentioned last time a little bit, I'll end with this today. The distinction between a junzi and a shaojin. By the way, this you'll see this on the end of a lot of Chinese words. That zi, Kongzi, Lao Tzu. What does it mean? Literally means son of, but not in a literal sense. So to say that, what does Kongzi mean? Literally, a child of Kong. Okay, and child in the sense of being beholden unto that. So literally, like, a jun is like a prince or a king, a dignified figure. So junzi, like the son of a prince, in the sense of someone who goes after being princely and appropriate. So the person who gets the Zhang Ming right, looks at their behaviors, and tries to exemplify them in a meaningful way, looking at being conscious of everything they do, and how it looks, and how it appears, not to do anything in a casual way. The person who does this is a junzi. This is the Confucian ideal person. Be a junzi. Don't be a shaozhen. I love this. I think even if you put it into Google Translate today in modern Mandarin, I think it will also work in Cantonese. Put shaozhen in. Literally in Chinese, I think it still means tiny man. Little person, but not little person in the sense of, let's go to the mines in the morning, okay? Little person in the sense that you are an undignified person. You don't magnify the greatness of humanity. That has nothing to do with verticality. So be a son of a prince, be a son of a prince, don't be a tiny person. And literally, a tiny man. And like I said, I think in Mandarin, this will still be used to mean somebody who is childish, puerile, idiot. It's still used in that way. So what's the juxtaposition here? How do I be a junzi? See that list over there? The Zhang Ming? Do your job. And approach nothing in a casual way. every moment should be, you should look at the significance of every moment and be mindful of yourself. I mean, aside, I think a good illustration of a jinsa, all right, I'm going to make a slight pop culture reference. Is anybody familiar with Avatar, The Last Airbender? And if you're not, you should be. Okay. There's a character on there, depending on which version you're looking at, different ways to pronounce it. The Uncle Ira, who's the Confucian ideal. He's very big in tea as well. Right? I think that's significant. This character it's a Western take on this Confucian ideal. Every moment is precious. You won't see that character just gallivanting about. Everything, there's a kind of intensity burning in every moment. Okay, and I'm sure there's probably a supercut on YouTube you could get a sense of this character, but I think it's a good illustration of what a junzi looks like. Someone who's mindful of every situation. No moment is unimportant. Even things that seem simple and insignificant are themselves significant because you're experiencing them. So do it right. The Shaozhen, on the other hand, what's the tiny man like? Filled with nothing but will. What do I mean by this? This is the son who won't do this. Right now what comes to mind is Augustus Gloop. Really any of them. I'm thinking of Roald Dahl's Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. Yes, this is where my mind just goes into weird places. Okay, children's stories are great illustrations, I think. Or really any of those other kids other than Charlie. All the kids in Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. Has anyone read the book? You've probably seen the movie. All right. What's wrong with all those kids? Every single one of them. Augustus Gloop, Violet Beauregard, Mike TV, American Salt, all of them. I think especially of the book versions. I was just looking at this yesterday. Augustus Gloop. All right, get the song out of your head. Okay. Augustus Gloop, the one that goes to the chocolate river and just starts tearing it up. And the book stresses this too. Each one of those kids, when they do something like that, when Violet goes and gets the gum and tastes the roast beef, you're turning violet, Violet. All those kids are all warned by both their parents and Wonka, don't do what you're about to do. You're still doing it, don't do it, and now you did it. And that's why they're all liable to this. There's kind of a sadistic sense of punishment, which I think permeates all of Roald Dahl's writings, by the way. But there's a sense of, you got what's coming to you, you naughty child. And it wasn't just their greed, which all of the other kids have. It was the fact that they were told, don't do that, don't do that, don't do that, don't do that, and they did it anyway, by everybody in authority. Well, you got what's coming to you. That's why Augustus Gloop goes up the pipe. That's why Violet's going to be Violet for the rest of her life, even if she gets shrunk down a bit. That's why that's going to happen, because they were tiny. Not constrained by, not merely by others, but neither by themselves. So, the tiny person has no sense of restraint whatsoever. So restrain yourself. That doesn't mean consign yourself to a complete life of mediocrity or a life deprived of sensation. That's not what's being said here. But there is a sense in which get your act together. And if you can do that, you can expect to be happy. If you live an undisciplined life, expect to have disastrous results. So, I'm going to point to a few things in the text for next week. Then I'll put this on Blackboard today. So otherwise, we're done. Have a very Junsa day.